What's up, everybody? Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. I'm Anthony. On today's video, we're going to be talking about green beans. More specifically, I wanted to show you how you can pressure can or process your own supply. That way you don't have to worry about buying them and you have a long-term food storage solution. That's right, today we're talking all about green beans, and I want to be more specific because I want to stay on 4 main points, okay? 4 points to make sure that I stay on topic because, you know, sometimes I have a habit of wandering, and we're going to try to avoid that by making sure I stay on these 4 topics. Number 1, we're going to talk about the difference between actual green beans and a different, like a dry bean. We are going to talk about, number 2 is going to be the varieties that I've grown that I've had success in my area of South Carolina. Number 3 is going to be a practical application where I'm going to actually show you how to pressure can beans the right way. And number 4, I'm going to go over a couple questions that I'm probably going to get before the end of the video. That way I can hopefully answer some of those questions before you have to type it out. Okay, so number 1, first and foremost, what is the difference between a green bean and a dry bean? A green bean is a immature form of a dry bean, but do not get that mistaken because there is a difference between a standard dry bean that you see in the store versus a green bean, okay? A lot of these are selectively bred for which one is better, okay? So just because they're a dry bean doesn't mean it's going to make the best green bean, and vice versa. Just because it's a green bean doesn't mean it's going to make the best dry bean. So a lot of times green beans are selectively bred to have a tender, no string pod that stays tender for longer, that we have a longer chance of harvesting for green beans, and vice versa on the same thing for dry beans. You have a lot of beans that have been bred to have a better dry bean, so they move past that immature stage as fast as possible, and they have thin fibrous pods that are not very good to eat. So for all intents and purposes, when I'm referring to green beans, yes, you can absolutely let them stay on the plant and let them dry out, and they will produce a dry bean that you can use in cooking like you would pinto beans, black beans, whatever. But there are much better options out there, and the seeds that I basically let grow to the point where they dry in the hull and shake around so I can harvest them are strictly for the next year's seed. I don't use them for a dry bean. I use them mainly for a green bean. Now, there are several reasons why one would want to eat green beans over dry beans, and I'm going to go over 2 main parts right now. Number 1, lectins or PHAs. There's actually a long word for it I'll put down here, but lectins are basically an anti-nutrient, and it's the plant's defense mechanism, okay? The defense mechanism of any kind of plant requires some sort of reason why mammals especially will not want to eat this plant. That way it has the ability to grow and actually reproduce seed. Because you can imagine if there's no defense mechanism on one of these plants, then there's a really good chance they're not going to make it to reproduce seed and the plant's going to die out. So some plants have actually had a evolution to where they become toxic until they're cooked. Beans is one of those. So if you eat green beans or dry beans, they have lectins in them, which are toxic. They will cause nausea, stomach pain, sometimes diarrhea, things like that. So if you don't cook your beans, especially dry beans, soak them and then cook them for long periods of time, that's why you notice a lot of people have gas and upset stomach and, you know, stomach distress when they eat beans because there's so many lectins still present. Now, the plus side of green beans, yes, it's starting to rain on me. The plus side of green beans is they haven't quite developed all those PHAs or lectins yet, so they're very immature, so it's a very minute amount compared to the full-on mature dry beans. So when it comes down to actually cooking, you don't need to cook them near as long. A simple pan sear, or I say like a saute in a pan with some butter, is usually more than enough to tenderize those already tender pods and destroy any lectins that are present. And when it comes down to the nutritional benefits of both, they are very high in protein, things like that. We all know beans are high in protein, but green beans specifically are very high in things like vitamin A, vitamin K, potassium, and folate and fiber. Okay, you obviously need fiber to move things along, slow down your digestion, so that's why eating these are really good, especially having with a meal, because it basically keeps you full for longer. Alrighty, so what are the kinds that I've grown that I like the most? Okay, so I'm going to give you my top 3, my favorite beans to eat as a green bean, and that's going to be the dragon tongue bean, which I've grown for about 2 years. I haven't grown any this year, but I do like those. They are a more bush style bean. The Blue Lake 47 bean, which is what the ones I currently have used to be. I've definitely been saving this seed for the last like 10 years, so it's not the same, you know, kind that you can buy at a grocery store. I'm sure it's crossed or whatever else, but yeah, it's still the same bush style bean, and it's really good, stringless variety. And the rattlesnake pole bean, because pole beans and bush beans, yes, there's, they both produce pods, but pole beans produce for much longer. And I like the rattlesnake pole beans because they produce very big pods, very good pods, and they're stringless until they get like really big. So you can absolutely harvest the crap out of those the same way you would a bush bean, and get as much green beans as you possibly can throughout the season. Usually with bush beans, they'll produce everything all at once, or maybe 1 or 2 flushes and they're done, while pole beans will keep producing if you keep on picking. Now on to number 3, the reason why I'm sure a lot of people are probably watching this video, how to actually process your beans into something long term. Okay, you can absolutely freeze these. If you're going to freeze them, you're going to definitely want to make sure you blanch them. Blanching, the whole reason anyone blanches anything is to make sure that you're destroying certain enzymes that are present in basically all food that will lead to degradation. Okay, so it's like a slow, I wouldn't use the word rotting, but it is. It's like decomposition of the actual plant. So even if you put it in the freezer, it's slowly going to decompose unless you destroy those enzymes. So if you blanch something, then those enzymes are destroyed and they'll have a much better shelf life in the freezer when you do that. So you're absolutely going to want to blanch some of these if you want to keep them in the freezer. But I don't freeze mine because I like my freezer space for everything else. So I usually like to use the pressure canner. You're definitely going to want to pressure can these, not water bath can them, because it's a low acid food. You can pickle them, then water bath can them, no problem, because the pickling solution is going to basically lower that pH to a point where anything in a water bath canner will be safe. But if you're not using a pickling solution, you're just going to put them in salt water like I do, then you're going to want to pressure can. So first things first, if we're going to pressure can, we got to go out and pick a whole bunch of these green beans that are ready in the garden right now. So let's go ahead and get out of the garden. Alrighty, here is my green bean patch. Nothing super special. This is the first of the patches. I usually do 2 per year, 1 in the spring and 1 in the fall. The spring never really seems to give me the quantity as the fall does for whatever reason, but at least it's, still food to eat, and I'm not complaining. So these are bush beans. I usually put down this right as the soil's workable, and within a couple, 10 weeks, 9 weeks, they're really pretty good to go. As you see here, I got a pretty decent supply for just such a small bed. So let's get in the kitchen and get these things processed. Okay, let's get started. First things first, you are absolutely going to want to make sure that you are rinsing off any vegetable that you may be harvesting from your garden, especially if you're like me and grow organically, because little bugs like this are going to be wanting to hitch a ride into your house and take advantage of you. So in order to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of and you don't have to worry about eating these little critters, just a simple rinse and washing things off will be able to pay you dividends. Now you're going to perform an inspection to make sure that all of your beans look pretty good. And to see this little stem end, I usually just break it off. That simple. And then I'll take the good bean and toss it into another bowl. As you see, some of them as I've harvested, I broke off as I was out in the field, so that makes life even easier. But you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're paying attention to the quality of how these beans look. Here's an example of one that is insect damaged. Now, some people might be, tempted, hey, just throw the whole bean away. But no, you still got half a bean. So what I like to do is I just break it in half and keep the good half. The other half goes in the throwaway bowl. But this one is a prime example of one that's all the way bad, but you got to make sure you're doing an inspection, because you look at it from the backside, it still looks pretty good. So you have to make sure you're looking at each one of these individually, because you don't want to can that. So at the end of all that, I ended up with about almost 2 pounds worth of green beans. So let's go ahead and get them in jars. Now it's going to be time to fill your jars. So this is your standard pint wide mouth jars, and all I like to do is I like to take my green beans and I like to do the stand-up method in a raw pack. Raw pack means I'm putting them in the jars raw, and I stand them up on end because I feel like I can get more beans in that way. You can cut them up and do like, if you would have normal green beans that you'd buy from a store, but I like to stand them up like this and basically stick them in every single crevice I can, to the point where they're so tight packed that if I turn the jar upside down, they don't come out. And I just repeat that process till I run out of beans. It's one that's worked for me for years. This is just how I do it. If you feel like doing the chopped up way and you feel like you can get more in there, by all means do that. But this is the way I do it. Now you're going to take some pickling salts. You don't want to use regular iodized salt, because it's going to have anti-caking agents and colorants, and it's going to make your color of your stuff turn kind of funky and get cloudy over time. So if you just use canning salt as regular basic salt, and I'll usually put between a half a teaspoon and a teaspoon in these jars. Basically eyeball it because this is a full teaspoon. And yeah, looking good. Then we take our was boiling water, now simmering water, and we just pour it up until we are right at about an inch of headspace. Now, for those of you who don't know, the headspace is basically the amount of space that's from the liquid to the top or the lid of the jar. The headspace is very key because if you have too much, then it's going to overflow. If you have too little, it's not going to seal. So as you see, this is the headspace tool. You want to go, when you're pressure canning, to 1 inch. That one looks pretty good. This one is overfilled. But remember, I always like to fill these up a little bit more because it's not really overfilled. You just got to get the air bubbles out. So that's why I use the other side of this tool to get the air bubbles out, move those beans around, because air bubbles trapped in there will make that liquid level drop down just enough, so you might have to add more liquid. So I make sure all my headspace is good. Don't worry about that one on the top right, top left corner. I filled it up later. I had to boil some more water. Now you got a paper towel with vinegar on it so you can clean off the rims. This is more for if you're pickling something with sugar or you have fats, but I like to do this. It's a good habit to be into. You just wipe the lid, the rims off so the lids will seal. And you place your lids on. I just get mine, warmed up in water from under the tap and put them on the jars finger tight. Get your rings, put them on finger tight. Remember, finger tight. Don't crank down on these things. You crank them down, you're not going to get a seal. So just go simple, finger tight, snug, you're good to go. Now it comes time to fill up your canner. These are the pints. You're going to put your water up to the line like you're supposed to when you pressure can. If you have any gaps like me, you put a quart or a pint jar of water in there because sterile water rules. It's nice to just do it and just fill the gaps as you're doing it anyway. And you're going to look into the book. This is green beans, snap beans, or wax beans. I do a raw pack. Look at the time to process. Hot or raw pack and hot pack both are for 20-minute pints, and quarts are 25 minutes. So 20 minutes is our time. Let's go ahead and get it up to temperature. So I got it boiling. When it starts spitting out of the vent tube, I put the weight on. When I put the weight on, that's when it starts spitting out of the pressure valve cylinder. When those know you got pressure, I just hold it down with a towel until it pops up like that. And now I'm building pressure. Once we get up to 10 psi, I start my timer. 20 minutes is the time. After 20 minutes, you're going to get that nice, wonderful sound. As you see, I like to run my canner just a little bit high, 12 psi, no big deal. And I turn the stove off, and I just let it cool down naturally for about an hour. Pull my jars out. Do not tip these jars. Even if there's water on top, you tip them, you're going to compromise the seal. So try to keep them as level as possible and just put them off on a towel to naturally cool down. If the rings are loose, you can snug them up if you want to. I just leave them be. And as you see, they're still cooking in there, so it's going to be very hot. Just let them cool down. Alrighty, so here is the result of that. Obviously, I store mine without rings. If you store it without rings, there's a better chance you'll know that if the seal is compromised, you'll be able to lift up on it. See how I can lift up on just the lid and it won't pop off? That way, if you know the seal's been compromised, if you go to lift by the lid, it'll just pop off. If you put a ring on it and keep the ring on there, then there's a good chance that if it does lose the seal, it might regain the seal at some point. You don't realize that your seal's been compromised until you open it, and then you're sitting there wondering, did it come off with the ring? Did it not? It's just too much, ambiguity. Yeah, ambiguity if you leave the rings on. So that's why I just leave the rings off. Okay, so some common questions I'm probably going to get before the end of this video. So let's see, how long will they last in storage? Like this, I've kept them in storage for over 5 years, no problem. Basically, as long as that seal is still good, they're still edible. Yeah, if you leave them in an area that it's got more light, say on a shelf that has the sun coming in a window, then you're going to see a visual degradation a little bit more than you would if they were kept in, like, say, a pantry in the dark. But they should still be fine as long as you lift up on that seal and their seal is not compromised. You can probably eat these for over a decade. I'm sure I know a lot of people who are watching this video right now who have eaten green beans that are older than that in metal cans or whatnot, but I like to keep mine in jars, and I think the oldest I've let mine go literally has been like 5 or 6 years, and they've been just fine. Next question is, do I have to use a pressure canner? Do I have to use a pressure canner? If you are only doing salt water, yes, you do have to use a pressure canner. There are rebel canning groups out there that say as long as you boil them for 72 hours, you'll be fine and it'll kill everything in there and you should be okay, no problem. I've seen a lot of those groups out there on Facebook especially. They exist. The Amish do that, things like that. Well, we have better options, not to mention if you have to boil something for hours, imagine how much energy that's using and how much time you're losing. It is much easier to use this much water in the bottom of a pressure canner, put that bad boy up to pressure, which takes what, 25 minutes, and then 20 minutes for pints once it gets up to pressure. That's it. It's much better for energy consumption, cheaper for you, and much less time consuming if you just use a pressure canner. So if you have a problem, if you have any kind of compunction using a pressure canner, it's probably because you're scared, and they make canners nowadays with release valves or relief valves. So even if you do overpressurize, that valve will pop out and it will not blow up. Okay, they're much better designed than they were, 60 years ago. Green beans are a low acid food, much like a whole bunch of other vegetables. So unless you are pickling, like I said before, that's not enough acid and they need to be pressure canned. Okay, if you want to do safe practices, and if you're putting something on YouTube especially, because this is, everybody can see it, then you need to follow the rules, the blue book rules, whatever, to make sure that you're doing things as safe as possible. If you're like a pro at this and you've been doing this for 2-3 decades and you want a water bath can for any length of time, then by all means you can absolutely do so. You are an adult, but I'm just saying strictly because I do it the right way, I go by the book, I use a pressure canner. And another question I'm probably going to get is, which one is better, pole beans or bush beans? I think they all have their place. I plant beans primarily for green beans because I like to eat green beans, but it's also as a way to make sure my soil's good, because beans fix nitrogen into the soil. So by planting beans, and when the plant is done, you just snip it off and leave the roots to decompose in the soil. It actually helps increase the holding capacity of nitrogen in the soil because they bring in beneficial bacteria. So I plant beans for those two reasons. So whether it's a pole bean or a bush bean, I really don't care. But if I'm planning on harvesting daily and I want to have the longest harvest possible with the least amount of space, then pole beans are absolutely the way to go. When it comes to actually having beans that go into the canner and things that you're actually eating, if you brought me beans off a bush plant and beans off a pole bean, I would have no idea which one was which. They taste the exact same, so it's all basically personal preference. Alrighty, so with all that being said, hopefully you liked this video. Hopefully you learned something if you didn't know some of this stuff already. If you have any other questions, do not feel ashamed. Go ahead and put them down below in the comments section. I will do my best to answer them, or at least find the answer for you. If you learned anything at all, please do me a humongous favor and give this one a thumbs up. It is definitely starting to rain harder on me now, so I need to get inside and get this video edited anyway. I will catch y'all on the next one. Thanks.